Hey everybody, hi guys. Just getting our meeting started here, but welcome back again, of course. And we got just around 2 minutes and then we'll get things rolling. Okay. Hey guys, hi Kylie, Zoe. Good morning, everyone. Hey Sebastian. Hey Brandon, good morning. Angel, welcome back. Olga, nice to see you. Jasmine, McKenna, Simon. Nice. All right, everyone. Thanks again for being here. Hope your week is going on pretty well so far. And as you guys know, today is part 2 of our review session. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Happy birthday to me. It's my birthday, so birthday party review session, I guess. You can tell what I'm doing today. Just teaching and a lot of grading. But it's nice, I guess, to see another year come and go. But yeah, let's just go on into the topics. So we have this 50-minute period to go over as much of the material as we can. Thanks, guys. Yeah, thank you, Kylie, Brandon, and everyone else. After a while, you kind of get tired of these birthdays when you're up in my age category, but it's a nice day. And let's see. So the grades for the first essay are all done, and I'm in the process of replying to all the emails that I've received for grade requests. Everyone that's emailed me within 48 hours has gotten a reply, but there's some from Monday at around like noon or 1 p.m. that I'm going to get to in the next hour. To those that have sent grade requests, I reply with a full set of scanned images of your written essay with my comments on it. So it just takes a little while to send these scanned copies back, and I have other classes, so that's why it just takes a little bit of time. But not to worry, everyone's emails and requests for grades will be answered within that 48-hour window that I specified, and definitely before the midterm. So just letting you know about that. This is our second and last review session before the midterm exam Friday morning. So at Friday morning, I'm going to send the midterm form to you through Canvas just before 10 a.m., maybe at like 9:55 or something like that. And then I'll give you guys until the end of the 10 o'clock hour, so until like 11 a.m., and you'll be directed to answer 6 or so of the questions that I provide on that little list. But we don't know which questions there will be, and we want to have as much time to review the material as we can. So let's just get started. Whenever you're ready, let me know which questions you want to go through, and I and your other classmates will assist and make sure that we all have at least idea or sense of what the information would be. So guys, let's go. What do you think? Which questions should we talk about? And I'll take whatever you give me. Are the questions short answer or essay format? Well, you should give the most thorough and detailed answer that you can. If I'm going to select 6 questions or so, then try and use as much of the time given to you for each question as possible. So I mean, what's like an hour divided by 6, about 10 minutes, so just try and be fully detailed and accurate. I don't like to specify a precise word count or, length amount, but if it was me, I would think that probably a paragraph or 2 is in many cases a sufficient amount of length, depending on the student's level of detail and concision, which is why there can be some variance in that. But a couple paragraphs would probably be fine. Essay, I think, is a little too much because it's not going to be like pages and pages, but I don't want to cramp your style if you have the ability to write that much in such a short time. So I guess you could say medium length answer, okay? It's not one sentence. It doesn't have to be one page, but it does have to cover all the basic details involved in the question. Each question is going to be scored on a 0 through 4 point scale. So it matches the GPA scale. A 4 answer is a perfect A answer. 3 is a B, 2 is a C, 1 D, 0 of course would be no credit F. And there's also going to be point values associated with each plus and minus grade point. So 3.7, 3.3, 2.7, 2.3 to account for the possibility of pluses and minuses, B pluses, B minuses, A minuses, stuff like that. So your goal is to try and reach for 4s with each response that you give on the 4-point scale. So it's not like just all or nothing. You either get it or you don't. You can get partial credit depending on if you have certain errors, omissions, or whatever. And the two main criteria are accuracy and completeness. So a perfect answer is totally accurate, meaning that it accurately captures what the author's written words were. So it's nothing that they say incorrectly or that they misinterpret. And then completeness means that you just cover everything the author said that's relevant to the question. So an answer can be fully accurate but incomplete if it says everything the author said accurately, but it misses details. And an answer can be fully complete but inaccurate if it covers all the points, but it kind of butchers them and doesn't say them in the way that the author intended. So a perfect scenario for you is you cover all of the information and you're fully complete. And when you cover the information, you do it in a way that's correct to the author's idea, and that's accuracy. So anyway, that's just a little bit about meta questions, questions about the test. But how about the questions on the study guide? Let's go through those. So whenever you're ready, you have a study guide list. So use it right now and just direct us to which questions that we should talk about. Okay, so Sydney, explain Moore's argument that existence is not a predicate. Okay, so G.E. Moore says that existence is not a predicate, and he's criticizing the ontological argument by St. Anselm. Tell me, what's the word predicate mean? So we're going to do this together. So when I ask these questions, kind of give me your response. What does the word predicate mean? What is a predicate? Okay, good. It's an attribute or a feature of something. Like if I say I have brown hair, then brown would be the predicate associated with the hair, which is the subject of the sentence. So then, the statement that existence is not a predicate, that's what Moore is arguing. And this attacks the ontological argument because in Anselm's argument, he says the definition of God is greatest conceivable being. Built into that definition is that this being must have every quality that makes something great. And one of those is to exist in reality. If it didn't exist in reality, then it would lack one great-making feature, and which would contradict the definition. So he must exist in the mind and in reality, because existence, again, is described as an attribute that makes something greater than if it didn't have it. Now, Moore says that's wrong because existence is not actually an attribute of anything. And to illustrate that, he offers us an example. The example involves a linguistic comparison between two sets of sentences. So now I'm asking you, what's the example that he gives? He compares which two groups of sentences? The sentences about what versus the other sentences, which are similar in wording, but there's one little element that gets replaced. Just help me understand the other students what that example of G.E. Moore is. Two sets of sentences where no, that's not it, Kylie. That's William Rowe, different author, different essay. So we got to go back again. Question, what example does the author G.E. Moore give? No, that's okay. They were mentioned that, those two authors were back to back, so it's easy enough to get them confused, I guess. But about G.E. Moore, the comparison given is tigers growl versus tigers exist. Yes, Sydney. So he mentions that with tigers growl, there are three possible interpretations of it based on which prefix you give. So like almost or some. Three different quantities according to which how many tigers growl. Either all of them, 100%, most of them, the majority, or some, at least one. Now, each of those statements makes clear sense. All tigers growl, most tigers growl, some tigers growl, and even some tigers do not growl. Each of those things makes perfectly clear sense. But when we substitute the word exist for growl, and we now have these sentences: all tigers exist, most tigers exist, some tigers exist, some tigers do not exist. With this new list, 3 of 4 don't make any sense. The only one that does make any sense is some tigers exist, because that doesn't require a comparison between existing and non-existing objects. But the other 3, most tigers exist, all tigers exist, and some do not, those are just utterly confusing and baffling statements that don't have any clear meaning. What does most tigers exist mean? Well, most tigers growl means that the majority growl and the minority don't growl. But if majority of tigers exist and the minority don't exist, what are we even talking about? You can't count a number of things that do not exist. And so therefore, the statement becomes meaningless or absurd when existence replaces growl. So if this question were somehow chosen, you'd have to go into the comparative between the two groupings of sentences. And you'd have to elaborate upon why it is that all, most, or some do not don't make the same kind of sense as in the case where growl is the chosen predicate. Okay, like if I say some tigers don't exist, that's like saying there's a non-existent tiger. But how can there be a thing that's nothing? That does not make any sense. But if I say a tiger doesn't growl, there's no logical confusion or absurdity with that. That just means there's some tiger that lacks a given property. But lacking existence is not lacking a property, it's just being nothing. Okay, so again, we can see how existence does not function as a predicate when we try to place it into sentences where a predicate otherwise would have been. And when we show that that sentence now becomes meaningless, as in the case of all, most, or some do not, the point he thinks comes clear, that existence does not function as a predicate, and therefore it doesn't serve the argument of Anselm as he had thought. Okay, so good for that one. And I'm looking up at the question lists. So Brandon, you asked about 29. Both versions of the categorical imperative. So Emmanuel Kant, famous German philosopher of ethics, says that if you want to know what the moral law commands you to do or forbids you from doing, then use your reason to apply the categorical imperative to your actions. The categorical imperative, he says, can be understood in 2 different versions. So now I ask you guys, who can tell me what are the 2 versions of Kant's categorical imperative? If you want, you can tell me about one of them or the other or both. So let's get that out there. Kant's categorical imperative. Just fill in the blank for that. One of them is something like this, just as a hint. Only act according to, okay, so Kylie, you've already got both. So let me read it. What you said is, version 1, act always so that the maxim which describes your action could be willed to be a universal law. Yes. The other version, never treat another human being as a means to an end, but always treat human beings as ends in themselves. Yes. But even those statements are not by themselves fully complete. You have to give an example to illustrate that you know what they are saying. So what does the first version say, in other words? It says that when you act, make sure that the principle behind your action is one that would still be possible and not undesirable if it was elevated to the status of a universal law. So a maxim is like a person's policy or principle of individual action. It takes the form, I will do a certain action in certain given conditions or circumstances. So like if your maxim was, I will go to class when I'm capable of doing so and when it is being held, then that becomes the universal law, that all persons shall go to class when they're capable of going and when there's a class being held. If this were a universal law, there'd be no problem with that. It would just mean that people all go to their classes when they're able to go and when they're being scheduled. That's not contradictory. That's not undesirable. So that action passes the bar of the moral law. But some actions do not, because if you imagine them being universal laws, they wouldn't work or they wouldn't be what you want. So take the case of, I don't know, a person who lies to secure a loan and they don't intend to repay it, but they promise anyway, knowing that that's the only way the loan will be given to them. So that person's maxim is, I will lie about repayment of loans whenever I want money. If that was a universal law, then it would say all people will lie about repaying loans when they want money. Now imagine a world where 100% of those that request loans lie about repayment. If that was so, the loans would never be issued because every lender would know that it's not the exception, it's the rule that people don't pay you back. So why would you generate the loans? And if that was the case, then our liar would not be able to succeed in their lie because there would be no presumption of truth-telling, since it would be the case that 100% of people lie when they make such promises. So if that action was a universal law, it wouldn't work for the person who's doing the thing. They don't even want it to be a universal law. And it also contradicts the whole point of promising, because it makes promises unreliable. If everybody cuts the line and the person's maxim is I cut a line when it's long, then there's no line to cut, and also the cutter gets cut. So it makes it completely futile and purposeless. So similar to the example of people who cut lines. That's right, Brandon, as I was just mentioning. But any example works where it doesn't become possible if it's universal. So like one person doesn't pay when they go to the movies, they sneak in. If the universal law is nobody pays when they go to the movies, then there won't be theaters because they'll all be losing revenue because they'll never be profitable, right? And then you won't have theaters to go into for free while other people are paying on your behalf. So anyway, that's the idea. It's only okay to do stuff that would be possible and not undesirable for all to do. Consider the maxim, consider the universal law version of it, and then you can answer that question whether it's right or not. The other version says never treat human beings as a means to an end. So let's just remind ourselves, what's an end? What is an end? Just let me know. Yeah, it's a goal. That's right, Kylie. It's a goal. It's an objective. And what are the means? Means are the things that you do to get to those goals. Okay. So anyway, then, what the second version says is you're not morally allowed to use human beings as though they were instruments or tools to manipulate in the pursuit of some goal that you have got. Okay, so people should be treated like they are the goal, not things that you use to get to the goal. So like, I don't know, if I steal from a person and I take their property, I'm using them and their possessions as a means to the pursuit of my own desired acquisition of the object. And of course, that person wouldn't have agreed to it since that's a case of theft. So that's using them as a means, not respecting them as a person. If someone is raped, then this is a terrible, evil action. The victim of rape is used as a means to the pursuit of the weird, perverse pleasure that the attacker could get. But of course, in that case, the human being that's been victimized has been used as a mere thing toward the attainment of the other person's pleasure, which is a violation of morality. So when you deal with human beings, you owe them ultimate respect. They're not things, they're not objects, they're subjects. So human beings are not to be treated as items to be manipulated in the pursuit of your own goals. If the other person chooses on a voluntary basis through full information to be supportive of your mutually beneficial interaction, then there's no raw problem with that. But you involve someone in an interaction that they wouldn't consent to, now you're using them as a means for some undisclosed purpose or for some purpose they don't agree with. And that's when you do something that's wrong. So Kant says, don't treat people as things to be manipulated as means, and also make sure that when you're acting, you're doing something that could be a universal law. Okay, so if that question were selected, you'd want to talk about both versions and then give some commentary as to examples that explain what they mean. All right, so let's go back to the questions I see up here. Kylie, you asked about 19. 2 reasons that W.K. Clifford said it is wrong to maintain a credulous character. So let me know, what is first of all a credulous character? The word that's been mentioned in that question. We always have to define all key terms. So what is a credulous character, according to the author's description in the paper? Okay, I see you coming with answers. A credulous character is a type of person who would believe things that are not based on good, sufficient evidence. Yes. Believes without sufficient evidence. That's right, Kylie, Cordy, and Brandon. So what's wrong with that? So what if I want to believe things without sufficient evidence? Who is that hurting? He says it hurts, it harms, it causes harm in different ways. What are the 2 different kinds of ways that being this kind of gullible, credulous person or whatever, a person who believes stuff, whether there's good reason for it or not, what's wrong with that? What kind of harm could that do? Maybe someone will tell me now. Okay, so you say self and others, Cordy, that's right. But it's not enough to be that basic with the answer. I mean, I know right now in the chat that's fine, but like if this was selected for the test, you'd want to expand upon it. So how can a person be self-harmed by having a credulous character? Well, it makes you a poor judge of what's true and false, And it makes it so that you cannot face uncomfortable facts and follow evidence wherever it leads. So for example, suppose a person was told through clear medical evidence that there's a clinical diagnosis and they have cancer that they should aggressively start treating. But that scares them so much to even fathom or consider that they could have the disease that they keep seeking a second opinion. And when they find someone that says, maybe you don't have it, then that's what they choose to believe instead of the solid evidence. Well, wouldn't it be better for the person to face the difficult truth so that they can actually take proper corrective actions? So it's not going to be to the person's benefit to conceal the truth from themselves to make themselves feel psychologically better, because the actions that they're basing on these irrational beliefs are not responsive to the facts. Okay, so you're going to be harmed and at a disadvantage if you cannot observe reality for what it is and take actions that are necessary based on evidence. That's just one random example, but you know, we can imagine many others. Let's see. Cordy, you say there's a little buffering issue. Let me make sure and see, can you hear me right now? Just checking. I want to make sure that I don't go too fast if there's any kind of issue with the technology, but what is the situation right now? Good, bad. So can you hear the words, or is it cutting out so that my audio feed is not that well? A couple of you seem to have a couple of buffering issues. You know, sometimes with Wi-Fi connectivity, bandwidth can kind of increase or decrease depending on the current conditions locally. But we're just doing our best. There's no written notes that I need to give you today because we've already written them all in the past. So just let me know if it gets too bad and we can consider switching to mobile data, but doing that has its own costs because we'll have to momentarily stop the stream, change the Wi-Fi access to mobile data, and so we'll eat up a little bit of time. It's just intermittent, keep having to hit the live button. Yeah, well, we'll do our best, guys. As usual, the whole full lecture is archived and recorded onto the channel. So as long as the audio is coming through, then whatever visibility issues you may have right now shouldn't appear when it's fully processed and loaded to the channel. Okay, so my apologies for that if there's any slight issues. But I think we were talking about the whole self-harm, social harm thing, right? So I was talking about the self-harm element. Now, what's the social harm of having a credulous character? Well, it basically piggybacks on the self-harm element, because to the extent that other people will follow your own example, you have influence over others, or people look up to you or follow your example, then they will in turn develop a credulous character themselves, and then it will spread like wildfire throughout the world and throughout the community. After a while, nobody bases their beliefs on evidence and facts, and that's a dangerous situation that none of us want to live in. So the author says, don't assume that it's innocent, and no problem if you have a credulous character, just believing whatever you hope is true instead of what the evidence shows. Because even if it seems innocent in a single case, it creates mental habits that are unhealthy, which are bound to come back to haunt you later when you form a belief that's not based on good evidence, and then it causes you to act in a way that's not conducive to your best interests. So you don't want that, and if you act that way, other people will follow your example, so that also causes more widespread harm than just to the individual. So he says it's not just your business when you believe things without good reason. It helps to create a status quo that others will also do the same. Okay, so I guess we've covered that one a little bit. Going back up again. Paley's argument from design, that was another one asked by Olga. Is this a direct criticism of Pascal? Yeah, so you could construe it as such, Cordy. That's right. Even though Clifford doesn't necessarily mention the name Pascal, there's a logical relationship between what he has said and the form of Pascal's argument. Because Pascal says, just believe in God, even though no one could ever prove it, and no evidence could disprove it or prove it. He says, believe in it because maybe you'll be right. And if you are, wouldn't that be great? But Clifford is here saying, no, that's wrong. It's not okay to believe things just because you hope you're right. Unless there's evidence to show that it's probably true, then you shouldn't believe it. And so Pascal's own claim that there is no such evidence and it can't be proven, Clifford would say right there, then we're done. So you shouldn't have a belief. It doesn't matter whether you hope it's right or not. Consider the ship owner. right? Same kind of example. Okay, so I was going to ask a little bit about, or you were asking about number 10. So the argument from design, William Paley. Who can tell me a couple of things about that argument, even if you have just a brief summary of it, or any of the elements of the essay that was written by Mr. William Paley? Argument from design, something having to do with a watch, something having to do with the eye. Can you maybe fill in the gaps in that, and then I'll assist from there? Sometimes it's best to present these arguments and ideas just as though you're teaching it to somebody, right? So tell me, I'm like, your younger sibling that's never studied philosophy. I'm still a sophomore in high school, and I'm like, what is this stuff that you're reading in college? What is the argument from design? Huh? What did they say? So you'll just tell me, what is it? Starts off with what? Okay, so Kylie, if something has a function or a purpose and a complex assembly of parts that allow it to do that function, then in that case, it must have had an intelligent designer. Yes, that's true. But you see, that's like the summary that comes after the example. And without the example, the summary doesn't have justification. Okay, so same thing to you, Cordy, but that's good. I know that you're just trying to give me the condensed version of it. But what example is offered to generate this logical conclusion? So say you do find a watch sitting in the forest. Okay, what would that watch, what would you know about it? You would know, he says, that certainly the watch had to have originated from what type of source? You'd know that it would have had to come from some type of source, and what is it about the watch that shows us this? So good, starting with the watch example, that's where it starts his argument. Okay, Kylie, you know that it comes from an intelligent designer, right, but why? Well, Kylie, I guess you've sort of said it prior to that, but that would be the order of operations, right? You say, here's an example to get your intuitions going, right? If you think about a watch, right, you know that there's no other possible way a watch could have formed except through the act of some intelligent architect, designer, who makes such a thing. Because it tells the time, right, Cordy? It has this function of telling time, and it wouldn't be able to do that unless there was a very precise working of parts that all meshed together so that it had that ability to do that. Now, how could something that tells time with all these just detailed arrangement of parts, how could that possibly have just fallen into place through randomness or through chance? The author says, and he believes we all would agree, that that's completely inconceivable. No way a watch could have ever entered the picture of our universe if it wasn't for an intelligent life. Okay, so anyway, what's the point of that? If something has a complex function and assembly and etc., then it had to have an intelligent designer. So then after having established this point, he creates an analogy of the watch to what? He says a watch clearly has an intelligent designer because of the facts mentioned about it. It's complex, it has a function. But that, he says, is parallel or comparable to, analogous to what other things? What, for example, does he compare with the watch to get us to think that nature and things in nature are made by a designer too? So the critical core of his essay is an analogy, a comparison. These two things are alike, and therefore the explanation of the two things is alike. So the watch, he says, has rough similarities to things as such, like what? Yeah, he does talk about the eye, correct, Sydney. So the eye, for example, it's not the only possible example, but he just chooses this to focus us on it. The eye has the function of vision, and just look around you, you can see that it works. That's pretty impressive. And if you compare the eye with like a telescope or a camera, which is like a man-made thing that has the function of capturing images, the eye is even more impressive. And all the little rods and cones and biological components have to be just so precisely organized for vision to ever happen. So he says, if it was a watch, you would have conceded and known for sure that it had to come from something intelligent, not just nature, not just chance. So then if there's things in nature that have a kind of complexity and function that even surpasses the watch, which the eye would do, or the nose, or the tongue, or, go on and on. But those body parts, organs, things that bear a function and have complexity in nature must have also come from some kind of intelligent designer. And who could that be? It can't be a person, but rather something that's outside of nature, supernatural, capable of building things in nature. And that, I guess, is the idea of God. So the watchmaker stands in relation to the watch, as God stands in relation to complex and functional things in the world, like the eye. So there must be a God. It's the inference to the best explanation of how we have things in the world that are complex and functional. And the example of the watch is modeling this intuition. So that's the design argument. He does compare the eye and the telescope, right? But in general, the watch and its complexity is another example that he does use, just to set the point that complex and functional things can't just pop out of the sky. They can't just, grow up out of the ground. They have to be things that are built with intention. And so a watch has to be built by some being that has the intent of making a thing tell time. So how, he wonders, could an eye have ever come to exist, if not through the actions of an intended act by an intelligent being? Okay, so Kylie, yeah, the purpose of the telescope is to aid or assist vision, as he says there in the essay. That's right. So mentioning its function would be perhaps something to note if you wanted. So Kylie, you asked about the critique of the argument from design. So remember Ernest Nagel, he wrote the paper, Does God Exist? And he launches into a host of criticisms of many of the big arguments for God's existence, including the design argument. So let me just show you some of the things he says here in that discussion, Ernest Nagel. Okay, sorry, it just takes a second here. Yeah, so he says then, on page 36, he says, the conclusion of the argument is based on an inference from analogy. The watch and the world are alike in possessing a congruence of parts and an adjustment of means to ends. The watch has a watchmaker, therefore the world has a world maker. But is the analogy a good one? Now he's going to critique. He says, what is the ground for our assurance that watches do not come into existence except through the operation of intelligent manufacturers? The answer is plain. We have never run across a watch which has not been deliberately made by someone. So we know that they have got a maker because we've never seen a watch that was somehow not man-made or not coming through the actions of an architect or designer. But the situation is nothing like this in the case of the systems in nature with which we are familiar. Even in the case of living organisms, though they are generated by their parent organisms, the parents do not make the progeny in the same sense in which a blacksmith makes like a horseshoe or a watchmaker makes a watch. And once this point is clear, the inference from the existence of living organisms to the existence of a supreme designer no longer appears credible. So we know a watch has a maker just because we make the watches, but there's no necessity to assume the same thing about the works of nature. Furthermore, he says, the things in nature that he's comparing the watch with, like the eye or whatever, and the fact that they have a function and complexity can be explained without any assumption of an intelligent force or designer. And that alternative explanation for the presence of function in nature is the theory of evolution and natural selection, Darwinian biology. According to that, it doesn't take an intelligent architect for the world of nature to develop things that do have function and purpose. There just has to be this kind of mechanism for the selection of survival-enhancing traits over long scales of time. So 2 points. We really only know the watch has a maker because we make them, literally. And the function of the eye or etc. can also be explained without any appeal to intelligent creation. So that's where he thinks the analogy stated between the watch and like the eye falls apart. Though the watch has a function, we know that it has a creator for a different reason, not the function part. And though the things that are in nature have a function, we can explain that without appeal to the act of an intelligent manufacturer. So in 2 ways then, the things being compared in the analogy are not relevantly similar. Okay, so anyway, that would be that one. If I go up a little bit, I think, yeah, so good. More questions to come from you, whichever ones you want to deal with next. I think I said this. Did I say this? I'm going to hold an office hour tomorrow from 11:30 to 12:30. I'm going to give you guys the link for the Zoom office hours later tonight or tomorrow morning. But for anybody that wanted to, I'm just trying to make available 1 extra hour before the exam is taken on Friday morning, so that in case you want to have some last minute questions or anything else, you can drop by. And so I'll send that link later. But anyway, back to the study guide. If you have more questions, we could just continue. Sydney, what is the principle of sufficient reason, and how does that relate to the proof of God's existence? Okay, so good question. Who would tell me then, what is that principle? Going back to the writing of Richard Taylor, Cosmological Argument. What's the principle? Yeah, let me know. Okay, good, Kylie. So I'm looking at that answer you wrote. In the case of any positive truth, there is some sufficient reason for it. In other words, there is a cause or an explanation for any given fact. Yeah, so basically all it says is that anything that's true has to have a cause. So the next point in his argument is that according to the principle of sufficient reason, if something exists, it had to have a cause. Now, there are different types of truths. There's contingent truths and there's necessary truths. Contingent truths are like, I don't know, things that might not have happened. They didn't have to happen, but they did. Like, today's my birthday, but imagine if I never was born. Imagine if my parents never met or whatever. Then I guess the fact that I'm talking to you and giving you this lecture just wouldn't be happening because I wouldn't exist. So I can imagine situations in which things that did happen might not have happened. Like I wore this stripy sweater today, but what if I just decided on a different outfit? So although I'm wearing it, I didn't have to wear it and I might not have. So that's contingent. It's contingent on my decision I'm wearing this, but it might not have happened otherwise. Necessary truths, though, are things that have to be true and there's no even possible way they could be false. Like take 2 + 2 is 4. That's not like what outfit I decide to wear in the morning. It's not something that, it depends. 2 + 2 is 4 depends on factors. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. No, it's got to be true. It's a necessary truth. So think of math and logic and things of that kind. So principle of sufficient reason says that with contingent truths, they have to have a cause. So the universe exists. That's true. Tell me, in the cosmological argument, they say that the universe that exists is what? Is contingent or necessary? The fact that the universe exists. Which kind of truth is that? Just let me know. What kind of truth is the statement or fact that the universe exists? Contingent, that's right, guys, correct. Meaning that although the universe exists, just like me and you, it might not have been born, or it might not have been something that existed. Since everything within it seems to be something that can come into being and then pass away, and that everything seems temporary, wouldn't the universe appear to be the same? So it looks like the universe is contingent, and then the principle of sufficient reason kicks in. So if the universe is contingent, that principle says there has to be some cause of it. And then the last step in the argument is this: what could be the cause of our universe? Can't be self-caused, just like a cake can't bake itself. Well, could the cause be contingent? And also, that's no. Can't be the cause of the universe is contingent, because imagine that. Then we would have something that the universe depends on, but that thing depends on something else, because it's contingent, right? And so that would just push us to another question: what's the cause of the cause? And this leads into an infinite regress. An infinite regress of contingent causes is considered to be impossible, okay, because it really just has no ultimate explanation. Where did all these causes begin? So he thinks the only way to avoid an infinite regress, which is absurd, is to assume that the cause of the universe is not contingent, but is a necessary being, and that's God, okay? Something that exists which couldn't not exist, and which exists through its own nature, instead of depending on something else. So God's the necessary being. Everything that's contingent comes from God. Everything else depends on him, but he's independent and doesn't depend on anything else besides just himself. Okay, so that's the rundown. I mean, the principle of sufficient reason is one important step on the way towards the full cosmological argument. So basically, you'd list the principle, talk about contingent and necessary truths, establish that the universe is contingent, and then go through the question, what causes it or what could cause it, leading to the final conclusion that it must be something necessary. Okay, so good all around. Now what? What's the next question, if anything? Not to worry, Brandon, but yeah. I mean, in a way, I can understand why some might think that the universe is a necessary being. It does kind of boggle the mind to think that the universe, everything, comes from something, right? Because we only see evidence of particular things coming and going. It's hard to imagine the system of all totality of everything, space and time itself, having some origin. But look, I mean, they say there's the Big Bang. Scientists say that. Theists say that it's creationism. So it seems like science and religion agree on at least one thing, that the universe has not always been here. Okay, but anyway, going on, Kylie, a basic criticism of utilitarianism other than theory fit for swine. Okay, so make sure to be clear that this question is not asking about theory fit for swine. It specifically says other than. So you should not talk about the theory fit for swine if this question was given. What are other criticisms of utilitarianism that you guys can remember? If you could even just say a brief summary or the name of such a criticism, then we can go over it now. So for the moment anyway, if 26 was our topic, set aside theory for swine objection and tell me what are some other points of critique going against utilitarian ethics. Yes, so there's a few. I'm sure you know. Okay, good, Sydney. 1, too demanding. Yeah, it's too hard, basically. It asks too much from us to actually live that way. So that's one of them. And basically, here's the thought. If you're being told that you're obligated to always do whatever creates the most overall happiness for the greatest number, then that might require you in certain cases to attend to the needs of people you don't even know, instead of those people that you have existing relationships and bonds with. So for example, if there's only a limited window of time to save certain people's lives because they're trapped in burning buildings, and you have on the one side a single person trapped in a building, but you dearly love them and you've known them a long time. On the other side, you have a much more numerous group of people in the other building, but they're just unknown, anonymous strangers to you. In utilitarian ethics, your obligation and duty should be to attend to the needs of the bigger group, because there are more lives to save there and therefore more happiness to secure than in the other alternative. But many of us would think that this is a bridge too far, because we cannot realistically be expected to live up to that obligation, since being what we are, we have bonds and partiality towards some and not others. Another objection is the one that you guys here, Cordy, Angel, have said, and that I think is one of the biggest and toughest of all. The no action is totally ruled out by utilitarianism. In every single case, whether an action is wrong or not depends on how it would play out in terms of overall happiness. So is it wrong to lie? Depends on whether lying creates more happiness than telling the truth. If it does, utilitarianism says lying is right. Maybe that doesn't bother you, but for many of us, that's problematic. Another case is stealing. Could stealing ever generate more utility than declining to steal? Sure. Imagine like a case of Robin Hood, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. Now people are able to survive that otherwise might have starved through the provision of the stolen wealth. And the wealthy person doesn't really suffer much. But is that okay? At what point do we draw a line? And even killing an innocent person, the transplant type scenario. In that scenario, one innocent person is killed, but their organs are used to save 5 more. And if you kill the one, 5 live, 1 dies. If you don't kill the one, 5 die, 1 lives. So it looks like more life is secured by the act of killing, but is that okay? Most of us, probably all of us, would say that's totally wrong. But utilitarianism struggles to say why. So another objection, just as I'm describing, is that depending on the circumstances, no action is completely ruled out, and that many people would find to be deeply troubling, because many of us think that certain actions should never be done, no matter how much pleasure, happiness, utility could be generated as a consequence of doing it. Okay, so good all around. What else? Let's see. Still have some little bit of time, so I think we've got time for at least one more topic to go over. So just let me know which one you think we should do. Hopefully video quality and everything is not too bad now. 28, Sebastian? Okay, let's see. Yeah, so why does Emmanuel Kant say that only a good will is good in itself? Can anybody just simply tell me why he says that? This, I think, is one point of Kant that is at least somewhat clearly presented. Sometimes, famously, he's a little tricky and tough to interpret, but I at least think that this is one of his ideas that came through pretty clearly. So then why? Why does he say that it's only the good will that's unconditionally good? By comparison, other things that we usually call good or praise, they're not unconditionally good. So what does he mean by that? Okay, Kylie, only an act done from the motive of duty has moral worth. Different question though, Kylie. Sorry to say. That's something that Kant does mention, but that has to do with the shopkeeper example. So it's a different topic, really. This question has to do with his very beginning of the essay, where he says, nothing else in the world can be considered good without qualification except a good will. Other qualities that men usually esteem and praise are only good in some situations and not others. So that's the point I need you to focus on now. Why does he say that like intelligence or bravery are sometimes not good, unlike the goodwill? There's like a list of attributes. We went through them. We described how, okay, so Sydney, other attributes, intelligence, bravery, etc., may not have a good will. Well, the person who possesses them may not have a good will to match those qualities. And in that case, if the person is evil or wicked with a bad will, then then intelligence or bravery would just make them more dangerous. Yes. Cordy, if not paired with a good will, they're not unconditionally good attributes. Selfish or immoral means. Right. So like take a person who, we had this horrible mass shooting yesterday. So this is actually the biggest mass shooting in America since the pandemic. I mean, in a way, yeah, we used to have the body count would be like 20, 30 people in some of these cases, and this is 8, but it's a tragedy, anyone that's murdered, of course. So take this person. What if they, were very skillful and resourceful in plotting out exactly where to attack, what time of day, what type of weapon to use, what escape vehicle to use. If you have a lot of intelligence, then you might be more effective at doing something deadly and getting away with it even. But do we want that type of person to be that smart? No, because then they're going to outsmart the authorities and they're going to be able to cause more damage. So intelligence in the wrong hands is not good at all. When is it good? If the person is already a good person with a good will, then intelligence is a great and fine thing because it will simply enhance their ability to do good. But intelligence can enhance good or bad behavior depending on the person's mentality, disposition, temperament. Same with the other qualities. Bravery means you're willing to rush into some risky situation because you feel like it's important and you're not going to be too scared to do it. But if a person's going to go into a situation ready to kill a bunch of innocent people, and that's their so-called bravery, then this is bravery that we don't want the person to have. Okay, so name your quality aside from the goodwill, and we can imagine a situation where an evil person has that quality and it's no good for anybody. Power, wealth, physical strength. Physical strength is great if a person has a good will, but what if they're a bully? Do you really want the bully to be the toughest, brawniest, most strong person possible? No, because they're using it for bad things. So anyway, we're talking about morality, not what suits a person's self-interest. So if you want to be a good moral person, try to have a good will, because just focusing on intelligence, bravery, strength, anything else, if it's not paired with a good will, you won't make proper moral use of it, and you won't even be worthy of having happiness. So Kant says, stand up and maintain the good will first. And then you can focus on all these other qualities, which will then be activated in the proper way. So that's why he places the goodwill at the center stage of his moral theory instead of happiness or something. Because even happiness, he says, can be generated by immoral means. And bad people with an evil will who have happiness are just disgusting and frustrating to the good people of the world. So happiness can be also not even valuable if it's possessed by a person that's evil. Okay? So you'll see that discussion in the book. If you look at Kant, he says this, just so to kind of quote him. This is on page 106. There's no possibility of thinking of anything at all in the world which can be called good without qualification except a good will. Intelligence, wit, judgment, whatever talents you might want to name, are doubtless in many respects good, as are such qualities as courage, resolve, perseverance. But they can also become extremely bad and harmful if the will which makes use of them is not good. The same holds with gifts of fortune, power, riches, honor, even health, and happiness can make for pride and arrogance unless there's a good will to correct their influence on the mind. The side of a being that's not graced by pure and goodwill, but enjoys uninterrupted prosperity, can never delight a rational and impartial spectator. So a goodwill constitute the indispensable condition of even being worthy of happiness. Okay, so there you guys go. Just a little bit of context from the text in this. So I think we've reached pretty much the end of our time. There's 2 minutes, but it's probably not enough time to fully detail another sample question or answer. So I think I'll just let us go for now until Friday. So just be ready on Friday to receive the exam from me. Be present at your computer or whatever system you're going to use to receive the test form from me just prior to 10 a.m. And then I'll give you until maximum of 11 a.m. to report back to me and send back a document where your answers are contained inside it. And that's about it. I'll mail off the Zoom link for my bonus office hours tomorrow, later today or tomorrow. And anybody that wants to come to that could drop in as well. And as I said, I'll be replying to all grade requests throughout today and tomorrow. So you'll certainly get yours in short order if you haven't already. So are we all good then? Let me know in the chat. And once I see that you're in good shape, I'll let us go for today. Okay, thanks, Olga. And let's see. Okay, Sydney, Cordy, everybody else. Appreciate you guys. Thanks. Yes, thank you for the happy birthday wishes. It's fun to spend my birthday with you guys. So birthday party review session seemed like it was a success. All right, then. Take care, study, and have a good rest of your day. And I'll be in touch with you in the next couple days as we get towards the midterm on Friday. Okay, then. Bye-bye, and take it easy.